we have to wait? Have a quorum, so let's call our meeting to order.
Great.
Paul, can you take the roll?
Certainly. Mr. Eberl.
Here.
Ms. Tompkins.
Here.
Ms. Falke.
Here.
Mr. Peschel.
Here.
Here remotely. And Mr. Kapla. Mr. O'Reilly is
Excused.
excused absence, and Mr. Miller is
Excused.
Okay. And then we have Mr. Crum and the other members of the utility staff.
Great, thank you. Nick, was the meeting appropriately noticed?
Yes, we posted it here at the outside, and also it was sent to City Hall, the library, and various media outlets.
Thank you. Moving on, number 3, public comment period. At this time, the commission would recognize members of the public who've indicated a desire to address the commission. Seeing none, we will move on. Number 4, commissioner, council, and staff comments. Commissioners, anything before we get going? You know what, Nick? I think we talked about simplifying that to simply commissioner and staff comments at one time.
I think we did, and that might have been an oversight in the copy from last year. So
Appreciate that. So, commissioners, no? Any staff comments today?
No.
No staff comments today. You have a service award, though. Number
Yes.
5.
Yes, tonight we're recognizing Cody Kopek, who is celebrating his 5th year anniversary here at Marshfield Utilities. He started back on January 2nd of 2020. During the 5 years, he's spent that whole time in the electric department. He started as a utility engineer and then has since moved into the power supply technician operator role.
Okay. And he will be recognized with others at your summer event?
At some future event.
Okay. Thank you. Number 6, discussion and action on Timothy Hovendick insurance claim.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize for the delay here, and my internet's finally starting, so I'm just trying to get something pulled up. But yes, in the packet was an insurance claim that was brought forth by Mr. Timothy Hovendick for damages sustained when he drove his vehicle off of the concrete driveway entrance at the old water office located at 1210 South Oak Avenue. The insurance provider investigated the claim and determined that there was no negligence on behalf of MU. Mr. Hovendick received notice from the insurance company of the disallowance of his claim, and we also reached out to him to let him know that we would be discussing the claim this evening, and if he wanted to attend in person, he could. Ultimately, I would recommend that the commission deny the claim as well as the next steps, and I just welcome any comments or discussion you guys would like to have.
We traditionally bring this up after the insurance denial because it changes the statute of limitations should somebody persist afterwards.
Correct. It shortens the window to 6 months.
So, is there a motion one way or the other related to this claim?
I would move that we deny the claim.
Motion to deny, is there a second? Second. Discussion?
I noted that the pothole was filled in and then it came back.
Yeah, John Steen took a look at it, saw that it was there was a pothole there, so they filled it in initially, and then came back a little while later, checked it, and unfortunately it reappeared, and was able to determine there's a large vehicle of some sort that's driving through there, and unfortunately it's a narrow driveway and a narrow road, so as they navigate, they go off of that driveway onto the dirt area or the grass area. So we put a cone in there for the time being, and then in the summer we'll try to readdress it to try to provide more stable foundation there so it doesn't keep hurting a divot or a hole.
Is this on a grassy area? Like it's not on an actual parking lot or driveway?
Yeah.
The red line seems to be it's on grass.
Correct. So that's where the actual pothole was that the driver drove through.
Okay, so most people wouldn't be driving over that.
Correct.
Shouldn't be, yeah.
Okay.
Cutting the line.
Yeah, and that driveway is our driveway, but obviously with the vet clinic there, it becomes universal. We don't try to police it because it would just be too difficult to try to do that. We've had a good working relationship with the veterinarian clinic to the south.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of denial?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Nick. Do I have to be doing
Roll call?
roll call votes with Nick online? I think I do.
Oh, I guess we do.
Yes.
I think we do. So let's go circle back. Circle back. Would you take the vote, please?
Okay, Ms. Tompkins,
Aye.
Mr. Peschel,
Aye.
Ms. Volke,
Aye.
Mr. Eberl,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
All right,
So
thank you.
5-0.
That motion carries. Moving on to number 7, private lead water service funding.
So back in November, you may remember during staff comments, John provided an update on private water service funding from the state. And he indicated the results of the preliminary results at that time. As part of those results, they've been firmed up and presented in the packet for your information. And then towards the bottom of the spreadsheet kind of showed the 5 different census blocks for the private side, and there was also another line for the public side, which would be the utility-owned side. As you look at the results, you'll notice that there are 2 census blocks which received 100% principal forgiveness, and 3 of them which received 75% principal forgiveness. When John did the application, we did it that way by census block in hopes that we would get better results than trying to loop everything together as one, which the results obviously show that it worked in our favor, or at least the private side's favor in doing that. So now as we work with the state to move forward with the paperwork and the necessary approvals, we need to determine how that loan portion, that 25%, or up to, and keep in mind that up to that $32,550, that's all that we can request. So as these projects happen, let's say that only $10,000 happens over the next 2 years of private side, then that's the max of what the amount is that the state will provide. It's not like you think about when you do normal bonding, you get a lump number amount of money, like a home loan or something. Here it's more like, you can you'll get a loan up to that amount. So as we look to secure a pledge essentially for that loan, there are 3 different ways that we can move forward. One option is to work with the Public Service Commission to do an increase to our rates, essentially covering that loan piece. That would require a rate case similar to what we're in right now, and they would work through that to determine what the adder would be to provide that revenue or that amount to cover that loan. I think it would be a little tricky. We haven't got into the overall details, but again, if it's not the full amount, how they would massage or modify that. But that's one option. The second option is to make requirements for the property owners to cover the cost of the loan through a repayment program. That process would require 2 city ordinances. One would establish that program as far as what the parameters are of the loan, term as far as like a 10-year note, and then what the interest rate would be. And I think the interest rate can be set anywhere between, 0.25% and 4%. And you can also incorporate a fee there as far as like a processing fee like you would have with a normal bond issuance to help recoup some of those costs. So that would be the second option. The third option is basically a way that we could use commission designated funds to cover the remainder. That would work through, we'd work with the city, and instead of doing revenue bonds like we normally do, we do general obligation notes actually. And the city would issue those on behalf of the project. The city would be, in all these options, the city is the ultimate, we can't have debt in the utility's name, it has to be in the city's name. But we would work with the city, they would take out the notes, and then as part of that process, the utility commission could determine, designate funds to cover that remainder, or cover whatever that amount is. We would work through those processes. So far, Patty, John and I met with the DNR, and then we also met with the bond council to kind of talk through some options to figure out what the options were. And that's what brought this all forward. The next step is whichever decision you decide, we may talk with city staff, or we may go right to bond council to help firm up the next steps in the process. So tonight we're kind of looking for the commission to give us guidance on the preferred method to pledge or secure the loan, knowing that once we get a little bit further, that'll come back to you then as the official approval, and then we'll go to the city council for their official approval as well.
So I'm clear, we're only talking about $32,000? Or are we talking about the whole amount, not just the private portion?
The $32,000 is the 25% of the private that was only funded at the 75% principal forgiveness.
So when we talk about the general obligation notes, we're talking about what total amount of them?
$32,550 would be the general obligation. The general obligation note would be up to $32,550.
And that,
We
so that's,
can't just pledge cash?
No. No, we talked through that with various groups, and normally the amount is much more, and normally the utility is not in a position to do such. So it's not an option that's been fully flushed, and at this point, this program is too far along to try to revisit that and modify it to make that an option.
All right. Keep.
That was kind of along the same lines of what I was going to ask. So just to make sure I understand, and maybe this is my lack of understanding, just clarifying. So the loan could be for an individual household, could be up to $32,000 each. Is that how much the individual household will pay, or that's the amount that in total we have unpaid?
So when John did the application, I believe it's about $7,000 per.
That was my estimate.
Yeah, we use $7,000 per property times the number of properties that are outstanding with private lead service.
Okay.
That was what was submitted into the grant program.
Okay.
So that's the total amount of money. Now, within each of those census blocks, there may be properties that exceed that $7,000. There might be properties that don't exceed that $7,000. But the net, at the end of the day, at the end of the 2 years, we can only go up to whatever that amount is that's in that bucket, if you will.
Okay.
What we would, in an ideal situation, 100% of customers would come forward, we take care of this, it would be all done. In reality, if we're going to get some percentage, and that percentage, then even if someone is $10,000, will count towards that total. It'll be kind of the way I frame it in my mind is a first come, first serve.
Mm-hmm.
Those that get in line and put their application and do the replacement, those are the ones that will make sure there's enough funds for it. And if we bump up against the limit, then we'll have to just stop and say there's no more dollars left.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
There's unfortunately a lot of variables in the cost of the project, so we have to use a proxy to figure out the loan amount.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So is the commission money? What's considered, we're borrowing money to pay, but it's not like a grant is going to pay that money back.
Correct.
So are there any, like there's options 1, 2, 3. Do we have any options like 4, 5 is like using cash reserves or using interest incomes? Are those other options that can be done?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all below the line dollars that we're looking at. I think the cleanest way is we have a fund that is meant for these types of purposes, and that's just how it's been done historically. I think we talked about during the strategic planning session, and I believe there's an initiative in there that talks about our cash reserves and our, I don't remember the exact initiative on top of my head, but it's essentially we need to look at how we allocate dollars to different funds, that being one of the funds. So I think at the end of the day, those are all, it's all coming out of the cash. Just it's flown in the past from the commission designated fund.
Now, has anyone talked to the city about doing the general obligation bonds?
We didn't. We wanted to start with this body first to see if you were going to have a direction, because if you chose one or the other, then we may not have to go, ultimately we have to go through the city, but we want to know which way you were preferring to go before we made that initial conversation, because ultimately it gets complicated having to go through multiple options with them. As far as the borrowing level,
Yeah,
it's insignificant. because the city has such a head.
32,000 is such a small number, it's hardly worth going through the process.
I agree. That's why we pushed the DNR and we pushed on the bond council. The bond council looked at the city's borrowing. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was millions upon millions. Like it was like a penny in the ocean kind of thing. Is the way it looked like when he said the numbers, as far as what the amount of that issuance capacity the city currently has.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question, because I feel like I was just reading that next year we've maxed our borrowing capacity because of the police station. I could be wrong though, because it could be a whole nother
Yeah.
fund or something.
I thought the city, if I remember right, the city's in the 40s of millions of dollars in bond issuance, and I think the capacity is over 60, 65.
It might be though, we have a city policy where we're only allowed, like the state allows us to do
Yep.
this much, and our city policy is here.
Right,
And I think we've hit our city policy this year.
right.
So potentially, I just know because I was just reading a packet where we actually were shifting some debt
Yeah.
because of hitting our thing for this year.
I mean, I think, we recognize that, and obviously that would be a conversation with city staff and the common council. I would hope, given the circumstances of this situation and the fact that it's being repaid through external funds, it's not going to hurt the levy.
Right.
There should be maybe some forgiveness or maybe some flexibility.
Right.
So
And keep in mind, there isn't a traditional repayment schedule like a normal debt. This we can pay tomorrow.
Okay.
Once it's issued, it can be repaid right away.
Okay.
So you don't have that outstanding. You still have that liability, but you don't necessarily have the cash flow issues.
So that may help me understand where I'm at. So number one, redoing another rate case to charge everybody makes no sense whatsoever. In my mind, I think that one just goes right off the table. The difference between 2 and 3,
So the
I'm
challenge.
struggling with that.
So here's where I kind of wrestled through it in my mind. You and I are neighbors across the street. I'm in one census block, you're in another. You get 100% principal forgiveness. I only get 75. That's going to be somewhat of a challenge for some of the.
Yeah, not fair. I get it.
Correct. So that's one issue. On the flip side, this program is good for 2 years, and then I think I wrote in there you have to have 75%. Sorry, I wrote the memo last week. 75% is a take rate or apologize. 75% of the funds have to be used before they'll provide additional funding. So, we can't apply for next year's loan or next year, which gives us a new 2 window, unless 75% is used this year. So that's another component of this that could create some challenges, because the dollars may not be available in future years as well. And then at that point, those customers that haven't taken advantage of these ones may be eligible for nothing. So it's even, there's a number of complications with this, unfortunately. But given the circumstances. And the
So in
structure-
scenario 3, the homeowner is paying it back.
Correct.
In scenario 2, is the homeowner paying it back, or are we paying it from commission designated?
What's presented is the commission would repay that through the designated fund.
Got it.
So in essence, everybody would be at 100%.
Correct.
Yeah,
kicks
that's
it
the
back.
piece I was missing.
Yeah.
And it'd be only up to the 32.
Do we have that in the commission
Yeah, I think.
funds that
Oh,
we
yeah.
have for it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, on the balance sheet, it's around 400. I think.
400,000, last I looked, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, around 400.
That makes it a whole lot easier to understand.
Right. I mean, I think that we should do everything possible to get rid of lead pipes. Everything possible. And, if we are to say, hey, out of this fund, we gave money to Columbus schools, we gave money for pickleball. If we said, we're giving money so that people can get their lead pipes taken out of their house for free, it's not out of their house, but out of their property.
Of the service, yeah.
To me, that is an act of goodwill towards the community.
And even more so, we're really just levelizing where the state picked some for 100 and some for 75. We're just making it fair for everybody
Okay.
if we choose number 2.
Do you need a motion
Well, they're looking for
or guidance or what?
they're looking for guidance. So do you want that in the form of a motion to take to the council, or do you want that just as consensus?
I think at this point, a motion may be the best, just to give us, the commission directs staff to move forward with the option where the commission designated fund is used for the outstanding principal.
Is that
Okay.
the motion you just
Yeah,
said?
that's what I just said that.
We tweak it slightly just to make it,
Say the motion one more time.
I couldn't say it the first time.
Your motion was for the staff to pursue option 2,
Option 2.
where the commission designated fund is used as the repayment source for the
Correct.
for the notes.
For the notes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Can I
Yes.
just make a comment? Can we have the communications department put out a thing that Marshfield Utilities will be picking up the tab so that everyone gets 100%, and please go change your lead stuff?
we can, I'll be honest, we've actually gone door to door.
I know. But just a new thing.
Well,
you
but
know.
I think the angle you're after with that is the PR to the whole community,
Yes.
not just to
The
those with the
goodwill.
lead.
Yes, the goodwill.
Yeah, I mean, Jess and Melissa and stuff can.
Once it's all approved through the council and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Paul, would you please call the
Oh,
vote?
that's right. Mr. Peschel.
Aye.
Okay. Ms. Falke.
Aye.
Ms. Tompkins.
Aye.
Mr. Ebro.
Aye.
And Mr. Capel is an aye.
Thank you. That motion carries. Closely related, lead and copper testing and orthophosphate addition, number 8.
Yes, so back in 2020, we provided the commission details on a follow-up actions that needed to be completed due to action level exceedance for lead and copper testing that occurred at that time. I provided that in your packet for reference, especially since we've had some members that weren't here at that time. And in that write-up, it talked about one of the steps in the process is the installation of corrosion control treatment system that's due by the end of September this year. Corrosion control treatment is completed by the addition of orthophosphate. Orthophosphate would be added into the water to form a protective layer on the inner surface of the water main and water service pipes. This layer essentially creates a separation between the water and the pipe material. In cases where there are lead water services, like we just talked about, that feed homes, this will reduce the likelihood of lead being in the drinking water. We should note that we have 689 lead water services remaining, full lead services. Properties without lead water services would see benefit from the orthophosphate addition by reducing the likelihood of metal from like a cast iron pipe, from our water mains, or from copper services that feed their drinking water. Additionally, the layer would reduce discolored water situations as it creates that separation. As we look forward, we need to continue on the process of designing and bidding this corrosion control treatment system. However, as we think about our water and what's in our water and being proactive about what we put in our water, we wanted to at least bring this to the forefront and then talk about some potential options that we could consider that might allow us to not have to move forward with the orthophosphate addition. Some of those include testing out, which is a pretty involved process of doing 60 tests both in the spring here and then another 60 tests between July and September 29th. Ultimately, you have to pass those tests with a 90 percentile, meaning that 90% of them have to be less than 15 parts in order to not fail, if you will. Also, we could work with the EPA on requesting an extension. There is some history with other communities, at least Denver is one, for instance, that has gone through this process. It's just not known how quickly the EPA might respond. Not sure with the new administration how that might play into this. I think I've heard that there may be, the winds of the EPA might be moving in a different direction, so that may or may not be, in our best benefit of getting an extension. And then additionally, we can try to accelerate the lead service replacement program. However, not just because the lead is out doesn't mean that you can stop the orthophosphate. You have to get the lead out and test and still pass. So it's kind of a stacked solution there. So those are just, I guess, bring it to the forefront here and look for comments and questions and discussion.
And this is discussion only, so we can go straight to discussion. We don't need a motion. So what comes to mind?
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead.
So many things. Okay, so I talked to John, I talked to Nick today, and I think we have, as far as I can see, 2 areas that I'm concerned about. So the one is, we still have lead pipes. So even if I, as a homeowner, have switched my lead, or have never had lead, potentially I'm still getting lead from,
No.
no?
No.
Okay,
No, it's well, the system in the water mains that we have are totally interconnected and water can switch flow. But those are not those are not lead pipes.
okay.
Those are of different cast iron, sand cast, and other materials.
So the 600 Marshfield utility lead services,
Are from the main to the house, and water typically only flows in that direction. And there's backflow prevention on the house of basically eliminating the ability for it to feed back. So that water should always be flowing to the home.
Okay.
And if any lead was to come off, it would go into that property.
okay. So the first thing is lead pipes. And I mean, it almost pains me to think that in 2025, we still have lead pipes in our community, when we've known that it's been toxic since like the 1970s. I mean, that's 50 years of people drinking toxic things. So anyhow, that is a huge problem, and any acceleration we could do to get rid of our lead, I really think as a commission person, I would say we need to do that. Then the second is, and this is where I was asking John, and I just feel like I don't have enough information to say when you add this orthophosphate that's going to bind with lead and bind with copper, what percentage of that doesn't bind in the lining, what percentage ends up in the drinking water, and do we have any information on, is this toxic when people drink it? And I kind of need to know that information.
What is toxic?
The
orthophosphate
lead
or-
phosphate or the copper phosphate. So, we're adding a substance to bind, but not 100% of it's going to turn into this lining. And I just need to know that information. I just need to know, like, what are people going to be drinking? And we're giving permission to put this into our water service. And I mean, John's like, oh, I don't know. I think we're going to have to look into it and see.
Every distribution system is different, right? So you cannot really predict exactly how your system is going to react. Yeah, the principle of it all is that this phosphate will coat the lead pipes, and then basically creating a barrier between lead and your drinking water. Now, that's going to take some time to happen. It doesn't happen instantaneously, right? So at some point, if you have some issue where you really move water, you could be scouring some of this off as a possibility. I don't know that anybody's ever tested under those conditions to say it does or does not happen. So I really don't have a good answer as to whether it's a perfect fix or not. Other than you'd have to test after you start injecting to see how it's holding up. I will say the communities that have done the ortho injection and then done lead and copper testing have seen their results drop considerably. So as a overall consumption of lead, you have to say it is effective because it does drop their lead numbers down.
But they're only testing for lead as a single substance and not testing lead phosphate as a compound. So, yeah.
I'm not a lab scientist.
Well,
I
but-
don't know how they test. The report I get is the total amount of lead in the water and the total amount of dissolved lead in the water. Now, whether that's lead as an ion or lead as a combination molecule with other items, they don't say that, so I can't answer that question specifically.
And I don't know the answer either, but that's my question, is I feel like I need to have some of that information. I don't have it.
So, see if I understand, our option is to either put this stuff in or take all the lead out, like tomorrow.
It's actually not our option. Even if we take all the lead surfaces out, unless we get an EPA extension, we still have to put the stuff in.
Or we test out. We have to test.
Or we test out. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess where I'm going with this is we can want additional information, but we're kind of backed into a corner.
Well, unless we get rid of all our lead and test out.
Which I don't, unfortunately, isn't physically possible during the timeline without basically getting a violation from the DNR. I mean, to change out 600 water services, you know, it's in the write-up. We've talked to the company that's being done in Wausau. They did provide us, they indicated that they could do 600, but given what we saw in Wausau and just the logistics of trying to manage that in a community, I don't feel is something I would hang my hat on.
Plus, we would need the council to make that rule that required it to be changed, and we'd have to deal with the PR of, I mean, there's a reason a certain number of them haven't, of the private side ones haven't been changed out yet.
And keep in mind, we'd have to have them all changed out prior to June 29th, so that we could take one test with no lead in the system.
But
And
the lead would still be floating around, you
Correct,
wouldn't have
yeah.
that flushed.
Yeah, I mean, it just, to think you're gonna get all the lead out by that time is unlikely. I think it's something we need to look at it in parallel, but have it done in order to incorporate to put our hat on that to assume we can get a test to pass. I don't know if I.
And the testing option is really something that they really kind of sprang on us. Prior to this year, they had told us over the phone that the only testing that would, if you could pass testing, the only thing you could get out of it, because of it being our second time we've had an action in exceedance, was that we could get out of the publication, the lead publications that we've done for public, you know, all the letters we've been sending out, all the notices on the bills, all the, you know, the press release every October and April. You know, we could get out of doing that. Well, that stuff, in the grand scheme of things, has been pretty easy to accomplish. It does take a little bit of time, but compared to removing all the services or the cost of adding the orthophosphate and whatnot, you know, they never said that we could get out of doing that, where we might have tested sooner if we would have known that option.
Would you hazard a guess on what it would cost to run the testing scenario and what the probability of testing out is?
The testing is really a dice roll. We've had a lot of tests with doing the public education. We've had a lot of requests for tests, and I would say 99% of those have come back below an action level. We've had a couple, though, that while they're below the action level, they're like at 14. Most of them have been down around 5. So it's kind of a dice roll, you know. Being that it's a 90% rule, 9 out of 10 have to be below that 15. So if you get over 60, that means you'd have to get 6 or less. From what we've seen, it's all likelihood we probably would get it, but I can't sit here and guarantee you're going to get it. You know, if we just get the wrong scenario, or you get people that don't quite follow the rules. Case in point, one of our highest ones that we did last year, even though in the letter it said, do not remove your screen from your faucet when taking the sample, for whatever reason, she removed the screen from her faucet, and we didn't know about it until after we were talking to her about the results that she got and why she got them. We were trying to do some investigation. She said, oh yeah, I took the screen off so I could get the water out faster. Well, that maybe been part of the problem, but if you get a few handful that do that, you run the risk of failure.
So it's a 50-50, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, it's a dice
And
roll.
is it a 10, 20, 50, $100,000 exercise?
I can find that out. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'd have to go check with Amanda and see what we're getting billed from Ag Source, our lab, and see what per test, and see, multiply it by 60 and then times 2 and find out.
The other thing, though, is that even with the testing out, it says that the timeline, the DNR would require the timing of the testing to overlap with bidding, procurement, and partial installation of corrosion control treatment. So if we even do testing out, we're still going to end up with the the other chemical.
Well, if we test out and we pass the two, we won't have to install it. But however, we would have to go through the
So we still have
engineering and the sourcing of
another
it
cost
and
there.
probably signing contracts because of.
We have a design done. We're at the stage where we can start advertising, but that's why we're here. You know, we need, you know, if we pick but that's where we're at. We need to advertise and bid and move forward here within a little while here, so that we could guarantee we would be done in time. But that doesn't mean it has to be functional. You know, we gotta have it ready to go in case if we would exceed, haven't actually exceeded, we'd have to be ready to go. So we almost gotta keep two trains on the tracks at the same time.
So how much does it cost to design and install this system, and how much does it cost a year to keep on adding this?
We have in the budget for the project to be around $150,000 installation. I haven't gotten a quote yet from the chemical companies to see what our monthly bills are going to be for the actual supply of the orthophosphate. We have to find that out yet.
If we had gotten rid of our lead services sooner, would we be in this predicament?
Well, we weren't, like John said earlier, this testing out wasn't something that was known to us. We felt that we were on the tracks that we had to install this. This was the only route in front of us until recently. So yeah, I mean, back to your point earlier, yeah, I mean, I don't know why we waited so long years ago to take care of lead services. If you look at big communities like Chicago, Milwaukee, they were installing lead services into the 80s and 90s because because of just the circumstances in those communities. So yeah, unfortunately, we can't go back and change the past. We can only deal with what we have in front of us. And I think the testing is obviously an option. We'll get you the cost. I'm guessing, as John was talking, just some of the numbers I've seen, I'm guessing between $10,000 and $15,000 to probably test each time, just given the the credit we give to the customer, the labor hours to set everything up, and the actual test itself. And then, we can definitely go down that road, see if we pass the first one, and then have another discussion. Like, all right, what do we want to do now? We can reach out to the legal and proceed as an EPA, the EPA, and see if we want to provide some, see if there's a way to get some flexibility. What that means exactly, and if it's actually going to get approved, if we get an extra year or two to remove lead services and then test, that's a potential as well, but there's a cost that goes to that as well.
There is. They don't have a real reason to be flexible there.
Yeah, I don't, talking to legal last week, it didn't seem like they really had a statutory requirement of when they have to respond by to get a little bit of a flexibility on there.
Go ahead.
Is there a way to limit exposure with oral phosphate if we have to go that route? Or like what I mean is, we get notices that, they're going to flush the system and so you don't use it for a period of time. Is there a way to say, okay, we're going to flush the system with orthophosphate during the day on Mondays, or like for a week in a certain window, and then that would limit the exposure? Not saying that you wouldn't get any, but if we have to go the route of the orthophosphate, is there a way to reduce that risk?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is this is a continuous injection.
Continuous, okay.
Like fluoride in the water.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think, orthophosphates, I've done some research, and I'm not going to complain, try to show that I'm a health expert by any means, and I think there's some more research that we need to do. But I think the World Health Organization talks about a level of 50 megawatts, depending on what electric here, milligrams per liter is the potable safe level for orthophosphates. One thing to keep in mind is orthophosphates is naturally occurring. It's not something that's like a PFAS chemical, if you will. So there's some, something to consider there as well. So at 50 milligrams per liter, we're talking about an injection rate of 3 milligrams per liter. So that, a magnitude of 10, plus, difference there. So it's not to the same degree or same level. So that plays into it. And back to your comment about the combination, the compound, I think there, I guess it all depends, are you going to break off a chunk and chew it? I don't think that's feasible, right? You're going to have filtering and screening and stuff like that, so you're talking about a very small amount. And if you break the parts of the orthophosphate apart from the lead and look at them individually, I think it would be, at a level that's lower than what's probably going on now. Could be going on now, excuse me.
getting rid of the lead is the only way we get to where we can be done with the organic. I mean, because even the orthophosphate, if you go down that road, you're not looking at doing it forever. You're looking at doing it till the lead is gone, and then you can test out.
Well, we have asked that question. You know,
Ah.
if we get rid of the lead, you know, can we stop adding ortho? And their response has been pretty vague. Well, we'd have to do some testing. You know, we don't have any legislation for that or any procedures in place for that. To date, anybody that's started adding, because they still have lead services, are still continuously adding, right? So nobody's actually crossed that border. Well, going forward now with the new lead and copper rules, you know, where they're going to have 10 years and they're going to have to be out, people are going to start crossing that border, I would assume, here quickly. So there's going to have to be something developed, because I would think that, yes, that once you don't need that liner anymore, I would assume that they would allow you to get out of it. But currently, nobody will give me an honest and straight answer as to when or how that can happen.
I think the other note here is that, as John referenced others, about 25% of the communities in the state are also adding orthophosphate due to that, likely because of the lead exceedance or maybe some other reason.
On our current pace of lead service removal, how many more years do we have to go if we don't accelerate at all?
We've been around 125 to 130, so we're looking at about 5 years.
5 years. Now, what's a reasonable acceleration? Does it make sense?
What did we do that 1 year? Was it like 250?
I think if indeed this third party gets involved and we expedite through them, I would think 2 years potentially.
But if we had the funds to accelerate, I would say let's accelerate. You know, like why keep lead let's get it out. I mean, this is a public health issue that we should not have here. So if we do have the ability to financially accelerate, I feel like morally we need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that would have to be another discussion about how you want to fund it at that time.
Because we don't have that coming.
And you said it was like $2 million or something.
3.5 to 4 million.
At today's cost.
At today's costs.
Right.
Which
Or I should say more as of last year's cost. You know, every year going forward, it seems to get pricier, right?
And there is a risk out there, but the fact is that it's not causing problems today. They would tell us to get it out in 1 year if it was that bad.
Yeah,
We're actually quite ahead of schedule from what we started.
Yeah, I mean,
The 10-year plan, we originally, as a commission, said we're not going to take 10 years, we're going to do it
15
faster.
events. The original plan was 15 according to the DNR rules,
Yeah.
but we have accelerated that quite a bit to the point if we stay on this track we're on, you do another 5 years, we'll get it done in 9.
If we did it now, in today's dollars, will we save money because we're not 5 years from now having a higher cost?
Yes.
on the surface, I think one of the things is just the impact of the community, the sheer impact of having 600 lead services replaced in 1 year. There's a cost there, but I don't know how to quantify it, because obviously you're going to have roads that are going to have temporary patches or maybe barricades for a period of time while you're rolling the asphalt trucks, things like that. Just logistic issues. City staff to be able to investigate or to review every permit that we run through, to do every excavation. Just a number of component side pieces. Yeah.
One of being, some of those are on Central Avenue, State Trunk Highway 97, which means bringing in the DOT. And not that that's the end of the world, but going through them as another step to the process, which isn't going to be quick. So you're probably looking at just involving them. It's a plan now, so you can construct, say, 26 on that portion of things, really.
I'm not a big fan of adding extra chemicals to the water, but
No, if all legislation were being equal, going after the lead, I think, is, get rid of the problem, not try to cover up the problem. So I fully would stand by that. But not all legislation is equal, so we have to kind of operate in those parameters as well.
I think this is really, the chemical is not the end solution, and nobody's asking it to be. It's the stopgap, the bridge to the other side of the lead, whether
Yes.
that's 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. And then, yeah, we're gonna have a process to stop putting it in, but it doesn't seem worth the extra cost in the short term, not to just put it in, get the lead out, and move on.
I just need more information, just personally, to vote yes. If if people can say, look, we have all these organizations that say this is not gonna hurt humans, they're not gonna cause cancer, whatever, it's a lot easier for me to say, yeah, financially this makes the best decision. But I can't make a decision like this without knowing, is there any negative health impact?
Yeah, I mean, since our discussion this afternoon, I had John reach out to the DNR, because obviously if they're requiring it, then hopefully they've done their own research and should provide some information along those lines. At this point, there's no action that's needed from the commission other than just knowing what's going on. I think if you're okay with it, John's team has started looking at potential sites for testing. We'll probably continue that just so that we have that as an option still on the table. And then we'll, the bidding and design, I think we have another month before we have to really get that out on the street, so we're okay. Just knowing that in February, I don't know, can we wait till the March meeting to do the bidding? I can't remember on the time.
Yeah, I think that's the way it was set up. I thought we started advertising in February.
Okay, so probably just hoping at the next meeting, trying to provide a little bit more clarity on if there's a go, no-go in a certain direction. As far as doing any extension or requests from the organizations, DNR and EPA, we can definitely just leave that on the table for now. I realize that's another option, just knowing that if we wait too long, it may not be worth the effort. Is everyone all right with that approach for now? Is there any other information other than health impacts that anyone would like to see, just so to make sure they come back to the table fully with anything you may be looking at or thinking about?
I mean, John, it would be great if anywhere they have any studies about like what percentage of this does not turn into lining and actually comes through water. I don't know if they have that. And when they're testing lead afterwards, are they testing for lead phosphate as well? So those would be two.
I don't know, just another thought, I'm not sure if there's anything out there, but like, would home filter that out for people who are concerned about that? Brita water filter or whatever.
According to the schedule our engineers have laid out, we wouldn't have to advertise till late February with the bid due early March.
Okay, I think we both thought that was a little accelerant, so we may even have the March meeting to revisit this as well. So we'll target February and then we'll go from there. And if between now and then, if you come up with other ideas or things that you'd like us to look into, just let us know.
Staying on water theme today, water and public fire protection, number 9.
Yes, so the Commission and the Common Council both approved switching to the water meter method in December. The PSC recently indicated that we also need to clearly specify who will be billed the TFP charge. Normally what happens when we do a filing with the state for a rate change, go through a lengthy process, and then you indicate if you want to make a change to your tariff. In our case, we had assumed that we checked the box to keep it the same way as far as who was getting the bill would still get a bill. Unfortunately, since we're making the change to water method, and also the state making a change, they pivoted and said that our current methodology isn't acceptable and we need to move to a new one. So, so there's 3 potential approaches to how public fire protection is billed. The first one, and probably the most simplest, is basically if you have a water meter, you get a fee charge. That would, basically the change there is there are 86 sewer-only customers that don't have water meters currently. They would go from getting a charge to not getting a charge. I had Joe look at this a little bit before the meeting. Of those 86, a majority of those are located in areas where we don't even have water main or even hydrants. So these are some of the areas on the northwest part of town. If you think about Viaduct Bar, Lincoln, and Marathon Street, there's no water main in that area. Also north of that, up in the Manville area, there's some properties in that location as well. Again, they don't have water meter. They don't even have water available on their property at this time. So yet they're getting the charge. They don't necessarily get the benefit, if you will, that the others would be getting. The second approach is to bill all parcels. So we did some, and Joe and his team, along with some from John's, tried to dive into parcel review as best possible. So keep in mind, these are parcels that are in the city limits that don't have water service currently. So there could be some, there might be a water main in front of them, but it's a vacant property. One to think about is the airport, for instance. I don't remember, Joe, do you remember how, there's like 20 parcels or something like that around the airport property. So in this method, each one of those parcels would receive the monthly fee, which would add up pretty quickly, as you can imagine, especially in those situations. The third way I should say is again doing parcels, but you did a qualifier called an adjacent parcel. So going back to the airport example, each of those parcels are adjacent to each other, and then they're all adjacent to the hangar building, which has a water meter in it. So they would continue to get the one charge that they've always been getting. Where it would be unique is if you think about Daniel subdivision, the city has about 15 vacant lots, give or take. With the first method, each one of those lots would get a charge. The second method there. The third method, they would just get one charge for all 13 of them or 15 of them because they're adjacent to each other. So, like I mentioned, Joe and the team did a review. They did the best job they could based on the information we had. It was challenging at times because when you get into the GIS maps and you start looking at it, there were parcels that had overlaps. In some places where there were parcels where they weren't aligned perfectly, so they created these unique parcels, like little slivers. So trying to comb through that was a little bit of a challenge. And depending on the direction the commission and council would like to go, we'd probably do another deep dive on some of those areas just to make sure we have it set up correctly. Provided the memo is estimated impact to the rates based on the initial analysis, you'll notice that the first method essentially keeps the rates the same as we had proposed back in December, and then the second two provide differences based on additional quantities now, for additional properties paying a portion of those charges. Staff believes that given all the change that we've been exploring, that the first method, which bills customers which have a water meter, is the best approach at this time, just from a customer perspective. It's pretty direct and pretty straightforward. If you have a meter, you get a charge. In the future, that approach could be revisited and moved to one that might charge parcels that receive the service but don't necessarily have a water meter. Those kind of our thoughts on this item. So kind of looking for an action on which direction you would like to go, and then the goal is to attend the council meeting a week from tomorrow and present this as well, because again, the PSC wants a resolution that dictates what method or how this is billed to customers in order to move forward with the change.
Anybody want to throw a motion out so we can get a discussion going?
Sure. I like the KISS approach. Number one, keep it simple.
So you have a motion that we recommend approach number
Bill
one.
only customers with water meters.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
I can second that.
Second. Discussion. Quick question right off the bat, because you talk about number one, only properties with water meters in number one. And down in number two, you make reference to storage facilities. Does that mean storage facilities don't normally have water meters?
Correct.
Okay.
Depending on what the design of the storage facility.
Some do, some don't.
Well, do some? Yeah.
The mall, storage facility, like that.
Sure.
Probably Shopko the old Shopko building. Yeah.
Okay.
So they would be getting a charge currently.
How many, I don't know how to phrase that. How many built properties are there in the city that don't have water meters?
We asked a lot of questions when we set this up. I can't say that was one that we tried to figure out. Unfortunately, it's a pretty labor-intensive property process. I don't know if there's a filter that we could.
I mean, the concept that a vacant property doesn't pay a fire protection fee is pretty easy to grasp. The concept that you could have a building but not participate in that because you don't have a water meter, how frequent is it is the question.
I don't think there's a lot. You know, think of a couple of storage. The more traditional storage units are the ones that typically come to mind.
Sure.
Or if someone has a storage building per se.
Maybe just a lot with a garage on it.
Kind of, yeah, something to that arrangement.
Yes.
I absolutely agree that people in our city right now who don't have water and don't have access to hydrants, they should not be paying this charge. For sure. So that right there kind of tips us more towards, having a water meter.
Mm-hmm.
But if in the future we wanted to say, let's find out how many properties don't have water meters yet, would need still fire protection, is there a way to add that? To add that layer of saying we'll charge you even though you don't have a water meter?
Yeah, any future rate case gives us the opportunity to make changes. So at that point, you could make the change. The only caveat I would put out there is if the state pivots, like they did to us on this time, and says that, now these are the classifications that you can choose from, that would be the only thing. Given that this change has occurred and this has been more recent, some of these changes, I got a feeling they're going to be around in this capacity for quite some time. So I think that the opportunity will likely present itself in the same fashion.
Do you feel like it would be onerous to figure out and pay, have people pay for this? I just feel like this is a community pot. As a community, we're all putting in money to say, if at any point I need a bunch of water, I've been paying a little bit. And if we have people who potentially will need to use that service but haven't been paying into the pot, to me it seems like it would be nice